Jean-Paul, we are in the middle of a worldwide crisis. Can you please explain us how we got there and show us a way out?
Yes, Nicolette, I will be very pleased to do this. It's a wonderful day in the middle of nature here in Holland. To try to explain the perspective, you have to go back into history, and I will use for that two very simple lines, very well known to the people. The very first line is a line of to do, and that line you can see very in two different ways. As a very simple line, and a very simple line means it's a very simple individual type of looking at your life, and a very complex way of to do, which is referring more to the type of society that we are living in today, which is extremely complex, with cars, airplanes, internet, mobile telephones, and a lot of things we have to take into consideration. And if you look at the way we've organized, with 7 billion people growing to 9 billion people, our society worldwide, there's something else which we need to take into consideration, which is this line, which is a line to be. And to be is more the moral type of consideration, is how do we go about things together, between each other as human beings, but also with our surroundings, our nature, our planet, those kind of things which are important to us. That's the to be part. That is also very simple. If you consider that all that is not important, how do we go about each other, how do we go about the planet, or you consider it very important and you make it very complex, the very moral complexity. And you see that 4 quadrants are appearing. The very first quadrant I would like to go back to is this one here, where there is a very individualistic type of society and very low moral consideration, which is a very important event in Europe. That was the Second World War, 1940 to 1945, where the morality of the things were highly disputable, and there was a very big chaos in our society. When in 1945 that finalized, we obviously had to start redoing and rebuilding our society. So across the world, and specifically here in Europe, we had to start thinking, how do we build up a society which could prevent us to get in new situations of war? And so there was a very large conscience building around the to-be aspect of human society. How do you organize this? So once we got that clear, and we said we had to organize social securities, pension schemes, to get people into a situation of not too large personal challenges which could get them into an atmosphere of wanting to go to war or to join war in certain aggressions. We created a complex society around what we now call a society of well-being. The wellness of people around continuous food supply, health and health care, places to live, housing for instance, safety, public safety, all these issues were very important to organize, because we still had that point of reference of 2 world wars which we had to fight because of a lack of certain of these things. Work is obviously, how do you participate in a society and create some value? That was important. So since the 1950s to the 70s, the focus of the political discussion and the social and society discussion was around how to organize these things. Once that was organized, then the next generations were falling into in a bed which was already spread in terms of wellness. They got a feeling of that it was not something that you had to work for, or there was a risk of wars or those kind of things. They were kind of considering their rights. And so the to-be aspect was not that important for next generations, and they started looking at how to grow in their greed to have more and more. That was not only an individual type of reaction, a culture of having, a specific culture of more having than being, that was also something which was affecting business in general, which was globalizing and which was creating institutions, large hierarchical institutions, mainly focused on financial growth. But this financial growth based on consumption obviously created also a society which required an infrastructure which could house those kind of needs of consumption. So you needed an infrastructure, you needed an import, you needed large harbors, large roads, a lot of shops all over the place, and certainly a society which very much with a very high consumer mentality. That is what the governments, the local governments, were organizing, not only because they liked so much that people were over-consuming, because their own financial systems were based on that. They were based on consumption and taxation on consumption to finance the consequences of that same society, like infrastructure, but also the growing healthcare which was needed because of the overconsumption of people. So you get a relation between all these organizations based on financial aspects, and they create a chain of relationship, a chain of dependencies from a financial aspect, with an overall consequence that the economies of growth were becoming a standard and not the economies of well-being. With the consequence that we were destroying slowly our planet, we were slowly destroying our social relationships. There was a migration of people to all kinds of countries where the growth of financial opportunities were biggest, and obviously you get to a situation where all these growth parts are coming into a crisis. There was a lot of speculation, so you get into a crisis. What does a crisis do? It creates the complexity of an organization around greed, that it falls apart. And it falls apart by creating more and more smaller organizations, people who are large structures which are falling apart. You see that in big businesses and that are going into smaller businesses. A lot of people getting in unemployment. They have to figure out how to take care of themselves. So we have a very big chance to get into this strong situation of chaos again, with the possibility that is going to be creating war situations also. We've seen this happening already in the north of Africa, Middle East. Those kind of situations are chaos, and they expressed in types of war. What we have to do here in Europe and all around the world is try to avoid getting into the situation of chaos, because it can be very painful for all these societies, and it can be very destructive. So we have to try to find a way to get ourselves back to this situation of well-being without having to go through the part of conscience, without going through the part of chaos. What we have done in the Stir Foundation, we said, okay, we recognize this, we are conscious about the situation. What we say is, we don't have to put money at the center of all our considerations. We have to place the human being at the center of our considerations. What does the human being really in this present day society need? And then we find that we create objectives, and we ask organizations which are adding specific talents, specific innovations, and specific authority and power structures to it to help us organize this. So if we talk about health, about healthy environments, about air pollution, those kind of things, governments and others cannot take individual responsibility for this, because they do not have a chance to really contribute to a solution. We have to take responsibility all together. And we say that here we define these kind of opportunities to work together, and we say the human being, placing the human being together, we need 4 pillars of the community to work with us to do that. And which ones are those? That is, on the one hand, local government, because local government has a territory to take care of and has financial means, public means to invest. We need business from a creativity and an innovation point of view. We need the civil organization, all the people living in that territory, to contribute from behavior aspects and innovation aspects to contribute to the progress of their own community. And we need education to show the people that new conscience that makes them work together in a prosperous way, looking for what we call then sustainable progress as a prime objective of any community. We've called this way of working together and taking joint responsibility, institutions together with the civil populations, we've called this sustainocracy. And sustainocracy consists of sustainable human progress and democracy. So we first put this dot on the horizon, saying that is where we want to go, which has always something to do with local food, health, house, safety and those kind of things. And we have a democratic progress in establishing what priorities should we take all together to make this happen. Now that is a solution that we present as Stir Foundation to go from this greed environment and use the talents and the wisdom and the authorities that we have in very powerful structures to contribute to sustainable progress together by working together and taking responsibility for the human being, not just for money.
Well, thank you, Jean-Paul. Thank you for showing us a way to avoid a lot of human suffering. Thank you.